really what is digital transformation. This is kind of the agenda of the subjects we will go through today. So first, define what is digital transformation, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then we'll talk about what is the business impact, and then some of the components, technology perspective, if you will, from for the digital transformation, and then why should we act on it from security perspective really early. The earlier the better. We'll get to this, and then you'll get some updates about our activities as a team and our cybersecurity unit in Ingram Micro. With that, let's just get started then. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the term disrupt or be disrupted. It's a notion kind of thing. But what really is digital transformation? Is it really a project? Honestly, no, because a project has to have a specific goal or outcome with a defined time and resources, and this is really not the case with digital transformation. Well, is it a technology then? It's a combination of many technologies, yes. It's not exactly just technology though. There is a lot of other components, as in methodologies and leadership involvement, that kind of in a combination with technologies make digital transformation what it is. Well, is it another industrial revolution? Again, if you heard the term industry version 4, which is kind of the fourth industrial revolution, this is an outcome of digital transformation being applied to manufacturing. But it's not exactly what it is as in digital transformation. So now let's try to get really to what is the characteristics that define digital transformation. The first thing, it's all client-centric. So everything every company is trying to do when they launch that initiative or campaign to start doing digital transformation is that everything should be about the client, right? Now, let's think about it this way. How is that different from any other IT project we used to do? Everyone used to build websites, everyone used to build applications for the users. How is that any different? First, I want you to think about the experience that we all got from the web, right? In the simplest term, digital transformation is us trying to take all the information and knowledge and methodologies we used to apply on the web, like the ability to understand what the clients do with our contents or products, how they react to it, at what part of the process do they stop and read details, at what part they decide to finally press that purchase or buy button, right? And what was the trigger? And based on these analysis and this kind of information, we try to improve our products, try to do that more. Whatever we see works, we keep following with that. And then with the nature of life, people get bored. So in every few months, you'll probably try to think of something new that will grab more attention, get more people to work with you or give you preference over your competition, right? In that case, of course, we're talking about your customers' competition, right? Now, the saying is, again, to define it, it's a journey. In the sense, it's not a specific project. It's some kind of notion or initiative that the government or leadership of a company will decide to embark on. And once they do, they align every force in the company. And the good thing about it compared to regular IT projects is failure is kind of expected and accepted. And you don't see this with most of the IT projects because, as we all know, whenever you decide to bid for a project in IT, it has to have very specific outcomes, very specific timeline and deliverables. And if you don't really deliver that in time, then there are going to be penalties. But then because, again, we're doing everything based on the customer interaction with our contents or products or service, the nature of thing is this going to be ongoing process of innovating and re-innovating and so on. And the last thing that I think we need to think of as well is that in many cases, it will drive some changes to the business itself. It might even change some processes that were used or followed as a kind of industry standard. And this is exactly what we mean when we say disruption. Think about Uber, think about B&B, R&B, sorry. Those guys kind of changed how specific industry behave or act by bringing too many ideas of how the client will utilize the service rather than what can we offer, right? So just to put it in a more formal term, we think it's a notion or a movement in which a leadership of an organization will decide to grab all their forces into endless kind of journey of innovation. That's how it should be, or that's how people should articulate it or handle it. So what is the business impact of digital transformation? One of the very easy examples will be someone like Kodak. Now, assuming you're born like before the 90s, probably, or even like 2000, Kodak was still there. It was still the major leader of the photography business or industry. If you want to take a photo or a video, you'll probably do some work, you get some photos taken, you'll take the film and go to a studio, they'll do the work, in a couple of days you get your photos printed and you pick it up. Instagram, a small company, startup of 15 employees, sat down somewhere and decided that, you know what, we really can do better. Every smartphone has a camera. People would like really to have their things photographed, shared with the loved ones immediately. So let's just do that. And in few days, few months, they got acquired actually in 1 billion. That's less than 1 year into business. And funny or ironically, the same days they got acquired or the same week, Kodak got bankrupt because everyone realized that, you know what, it's not gonna make it anymore. If you can get your photos taken, saved, and shared with your loved ones, which is ultimately what the customer wants, then why waste time and money? If you think about it from the other hand, Kodak actually is the one that invented digital photography before cameras became in every smartphone. For multiple reasons, like the fact that most of their revenue came from the films, like printers today, most of the revenue comes from the ink. They decided not to really take it that far. They slipped on it until someone came and kicked them out of that market, right? So why are we saying this? It's just a reminder that it's really not an option for a business not to pursue digital transformation in some form. Even your government clients, think about it. There is an annual competition that defines how valuable an organization is or how is it ranked. One of the factors they factor in is how digitally transformed are they, right? What kind of services or new products or services they bring to people that interact with that entity. And if you are in Gulf, in UAE, in the Vision 2020, one of the major drives was digital transformation. If you're in Saudi on 2030 vision as well, one of the major drives is digital transformation. And it's not limited, of course, to banking or to government, it's everyone. Everyone has something to do with this. Okay, so let's get to a story first before I get into the components of this. In 2015, I was part of a team that was tasked to put a vision kind of for a designer hotel in Dubai with one of the Italian brands. And the whole idea was to try to give something that people never seen before. And again, it's all about the customer experience. Just example of what you would expect on that hotel is that by the time you land from your flight, you get into your limo, you open your phone, and click, you're already checked in into your hotel. By the time you reach the hotel, the electricity is already on your room, AC is on, so by the time you get into your room, it's already cool and nice. And at the same time, you don't have a key, you'll just have your digital key installed to your smartphone or your smartwatch, if we're talking about today, and then you'll have your access. We went even further about what can we do for room service and these kind of things. How should people interact with the hotel employees if they need something? We went some crazy ways into some kind of sensors that act like Connect from Microsoft, if you will. So we can track people movement. We had an avatar where you can, just by waving, can explain to people or select whatever you need to do in multiple languages. You don't have to worry about whether this hotel have your own language or not. You can just order things on the spot or ask for services on the spot. Now, this is all nice and cool if you think about it. But when you look at it deeper when it comes to security, it's really scary. Because to do this, we were supposed to get people to download a lot of stuff on their phones. We were supposed to be able to track their proximity to the hotel and connect this to our building management system to turn on the AC on that room. We were supposed to track their activities every day to predict what times they'll go out of their rooms and provide them something convenient, like even calls a lift for them, so they don't have to wait for it, or gives them direction for the restaurants of their choice and so on, right? So it was really a nice idea and concept, but when you come to realities or when you dig down deeper to the details of how will you impact people's security and privacy, it was really a nightmare. I'm sure some of you would agree. So let's get to the digital transformation components, and then we'll take it from there and talk about the security risk associated with each one of those components, and then we'll dig deeper even into the whole journey, why you need to start really early when it comes to security with this. Okay, so as you will notice here, some of those components are not exactly a technology, right? Like DevOps, it has some technology on it, but it's not exactly a technological term. Agile is a project management methodology. But, and again, you'll notice that some of the components are not even mentioned here, right? So there is a lot more components like artificial intelligence and other ones, right? But then again, those are the ones that are most probably going to be part of any successful digital transformation journey, right? We'll start with something like the cloud, right? Imagine now that you're in the middle of building a web app. Historically, what you would do, actually I'll start from DevOps because it will make then more sense, right? Assume that if you're not familiar with the term, back in the days when someone builds an application, what we used to do is you get your developers and project team to build the code. And the day you say, yes, it's fine, it's tested and everything, you take it and you pass it to the operation team that is tasked with implementing or installing that software on the production servers and running them. The problem is this was a very lengthy process. Secondly, because the application is now being operated in a different level of capacity and actually different hardware in most cases, some different issues might rise up, like bugs and stuff like that. That was not really considered as part of the testing. And now that you're in operation, you might want to look at these as bugs and you try to keep fixing them, which is kind of trying to change your car tire while you're still moving, right? If you remember, we mentioned that this is kind of endless process that we're talking about here. That being said, you'll build an application today looking at some specific features you think your customer will like, right? By the time you're done with them, you pass them on, and you'll find that people's interaction to them was quite different than what you had in mind, right? And accordingly, you might pick some pieces of that and put more time on them based on the feedback you got. And now you're trying again to make this a different version. So it's endless kind of development. To make this cycle shorter, right? They decided, what if we can start using something as a container, right? And containers are something slightly similar to virtualization, except that all of your applications kind of share the same operating system, the same hosts. So you're working on slightly a different layer than in the case with virtualization. We're talking about something like Docker, for instance, right? You build one instance, you install everything you have on it, all your service backs, all your operating system related services, And then you have separate kind of containers for each part of your application or your system, but they all kind of share the same thing, right? Now this is how it is with DevOps. Slightly relevant is agile methodology. If you're familiar with project management, the most familiar form was the ones that we usually use when we submit our projects to customers, is that you build a timeline, right? And you have this chart, Gantt chart or something like that, where you have specific deliverables and time intervals and dependencies, and you have a project manager. When you come to Agile, it's totally different because you don't have a project manager as such. You have a lot smaller teams working on a lot smaller chunks. And the notion is that you want to deliver smaller parts of code that is immediately usable. And once it's tested, you move that to production and people start to use the application. So you're getting feedback every day, and yet you're still developing and improving every day. That's what makes Agile slightly different than the waterfall methodology. Now, why is this important? Why am I mentioning it here? We'll get later to the rest of each of these components, cloud, mobile, and so on. But the fact that once you start releasing your first product out of your digital transformation journey, it's really, really hard to stop. It's a lot better if you plan things ahead, if you put security in your design, if you make sure that everyone on the same page when it comes to the risks, what to expect, and so on. Day one, or actually day zero, because the day you start producing products, it will be really hard to pull back, right? You remember we discussed something about bringing the web experience to the physical world, right? So imagine if you're in a website, you go and you look at some stuff. The website will install a cookie in your machine and maybe some other codes that will allow them to see exactly what you're doing. Remember your profile so that they can cache or log your interaction, and then they can analyze this and see what contents were really interesting, maybe even suggest products or services to use the next time you visit, or maybe send you promotions by email. If you want to do this in a store, for instance, like a hypermarket, then you'll need sensors, right? The sensors will do the same functionality that you would expect from that web site. And to do that, IoT became a thing, right? It's a bit scary though, so we'll get back to it in details and why should it be a problem to you. But IoT is certainly going to be a factor in each digital transformation journey. Now, cloud is really, again, related to the fact that once you get into this development and producing cycle, you will need to be able to expand. Again, you don't know how people will interact with your contents. Maybe they like it, maybe they love it, maybe you expect 10,000 users to join in, and instead you get 100,000. So the scale and elasticity is mainly what makes cloud a major part of this. Mobile, because let's face it, even though there's a lot of other mobile, tools, and you have sensors, and you have smartwatches now, but still the mobile phone is still number one tools that everyone almost has when they have internet connection. And finally, because we were talking about analytics and getting data from different sources, big data is always also one major part of this journey, right? What we will do now is that we'll start to jump into those components by details, and we'll just touch the surface of what security risks come with each of them. We'll start with the cloud. Now, I don't know if you had any interaction with cloud 4 years ago, but when I did, we used to go to clients and tell them that, you know what, if you had $1 million, you'll put it in a bank. You'll not put it under your pillow. That was a good sales pitch, but reality is Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and the likes, they can give you audit report for who accessed the data center. They can make sure that there's some type of separation between your data and your next tenant kind of guy. That being said, if someone can hack into your website because your website has some kind of SQL injection vulnerability, or cross-site scripting vulnerability and you don't catch it, it's not really a Microsoft problem. And Microsoft will never kind of try to even think about talking about it to you or compensate you for it. So the problems that come with cloud others and accessibility and firewalling, which is now becoming a component that is optional that you can add to your subscription. First one is encryption, right? Second one is identity and access management. And the third one is visibility and logging. Now, you need to remember, because you're part of a digital transformation now, it's not necessarily going to be limited access to users. Some of your application will need IoT sensors to connect to them. And that being said, inherently, IoT sensors have very bad reputation when it comes to security. So you need to really think about all of these things, right? Now, the next thing we should talk about is IoT. And IoT, if you're not very familiar with it yet, or you didn't use it in one of your projects yet, compromises probably by year 2020 is going to be 30 to 50 billion sensors connected to the internet, right? Compared to the current number of internet connection or internet connected users of 2-3 billions, this is a scary number. And you think about it, we used to sell security for the past 10 years. Your client will go and implement a firewall, IPS, APT, whatever solutions they can think of. They will build methodologies and whatever they can. And then today, part of the new project, they will install sensors that collect data, have direct interaction with the internet, with the cloud, and have not even the basic security measures. I'm not sure if you can see the bar in the bottom, but according to a company called FloatCheck, 15% of the IoT devices are still using default password. And this is just scary enough. Most of the DDoS attacks that happened in the past 2 years were launched from IoT devices and sensors, not from PCs, because by default, the new startups are coming to this area, are trying to build a very effective and cheap sensors, which means it will not have a lot of power to run, and it will not have a lot of processing on it, which means they will mostly rely on very basic encryption, if at all, and I'm talking about the good ones, and at the same time, it connects with everything you have. You'll see that it will have a network service, it will have a web interface probably to manage it, if there's any management to be done. It will have connection to your cloud, because this is how you'll get your data and inputs from it. And it might, in many cases, have mobile interface as well. Now, I'll take you a step backwards and tell you how was this looked at forever. Previously, if you're in any industrial field, you know that there was some network called OT, which is operational technologies, right? OT was really all about sensors as well. It's technology used on oil and gas fields, where you need sensors to feel the heat and temperature and whatever it is, pressure and all of these things, and give you those factors. And those used to be in a separate, completely separate network, right? There used to be an OT network, and we used to put a firewall or some kind of security control between it and between our network if we ever needed actually to connect it to. It has its own team to manage. It used its own protocols like Modbus and others to make sure that the components of this network can talk to each other, right? And that they can be identified. So let's assume that someone comes in and just connects one new sensor. How can we tell that this is part of our network? All of these mechanisms were built in when it comes to the OT. If you're thinking of someone like Siemens and Bosch and those kind of Honeywell, those kind of companies, they used to really sell a lot when it comes to this area. Today, again, we're trying to do the same functionality, but notice this, it's web interfacing. It doesn't have any security mechanism. In many cases, it has no encryption. And it's connected to your cloud infrastructure, which is, again, all your applications if you're in digital transformation journey. Now let's jump to the next one. And this is going to be your containers. Remember, we said that your container is slightly different than virtualization in the sense that they share the same operating system and services related to it. So in short, what you're doing is that you're building a container. In some cases, you're even downloading a container. And this is a laughable matter because one of the biggest web stores that offers containers for Docker, some security analysis company discovered that more than 120 templates of a container were already infected by malware. And you're looking for something specific to your task at hand, and you find a container that is really customized and built by someone else, and you can use it and utilize it. And you bring in this to your whole thing, and it's one machine. It's one operating system. If you're really concerned about endpoint security, this is one endpoint you really need to be concerned about, because they hack this one, you're gone. So according to FlowCheck, which is now one of the companies owned by Tenable, if I'm not mistaken, recently got acquired. They really specialize in securing containers. And according to them, 42% of the problems related to containers come from vulnerabilities and malwares, 21% from policy enforcement issues. Some come from the isolation between the different containers, if you will. So data can somehow leak between different application workloads if you don't design it right. The other thing, because all of them share the same operating system, being able to audit it at the operating system level is quite harder, right? You need something that can go a lot deeper than just the operating system to be able to tell who did what. And then the network perimeter security was also one of the factors. Now, imagine this. You build your own awesome application. Everyone is interacting amazingly to it. You spent a lot of money and time and resources in building this perfect platform or outlet for your business. And your competitor can simply get everything by just tapping to this one machine that has your container without doing the effort, of course. This is not a call to go out and hack people and their containers. Please don't do that. We're now going to the next step, which is the big data. Big data is slightly different than the regular structural databases in the sense that the data is not really structured. So you have multiple forms and sources of data that you need to save, and rather than saving them with the use in advance, in regular database, you plan exactly the fields in each table, and you plan ahead how you're going to use that data. And based on that, you make your inquiries and all of these things, and you save them. The case here is slightly different, again, because first, you don't know exactly what kind of data you'll need to be looking at 2 years from now. It might be photos, it might be something coming from social network, it might be videos, could be anything, could be lines of logs. And at the same time, you don't know how your application is going to interact with it. So to do that in a way that makes it usable in your digital transformation journey, what we did is instead of having all this data in different tables, you'll start now to have mappers that decide on, once the data comes to your network, it will be mapped to their designated area on your storage. It'll be set there. And this is what, I don't really agree with the term data warehouse exactly, because this is exactly what makes big data different than the regular data warehouse slightly. And then your applications and your people and analysts will kind of connect to that data and do their search and get their data and reports out of it. Now, because of this, you can notice there's multiple issues. First, what if someone manages to know what kind of data sources you're using today and started to feed you false data, right? This is quite scary if you think about it. And then the second part, or one of the most important, if you're worried about the competition, is that what if someone managed to start doing mining in your own data? So you have your collectors, you know exactly what you're looking for. Someone managed through your application or your analyst machine or from one of the data sources to jump into the actual data and start to processing queries to get or to mine into your own data. Certainly you'll get them to know where you're going and what you're trying to do, right? Based on analyzing what you're collecting mainly or what you're querying. Again, because we have multiple layers of access in this case, having access control in place and good is quite hard, right? Again, the data provenance part is very similar or very close neighbor to the generation of the data. You need to be able to tell what was the source of that specific piece of data at some point, right? Otherwise, you can be fed with false data, so that will kind of make the whole thing irrelevant. And the last part, because of too many components that are added on the run, you'll sometimes have problems with auditing all of these things. Who queried what, how did they access it, how did they utilize it, and so on. Okay, now let's jump to the next part, which is the mobile. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with enterprise mobility management, you're all familiar with MDM, but this is not really what we're talking about now. What we're talking about here is from the application developer side, right? So MDM and enterprise mobility management platforms really concerned with the user side of the story. You need your users to be able to use mobile phones to access your business applications. Then you give them a tool to make sure that they're compliant, they're updated, and they have antivirus, and so on. But when you're the application developer, imagine you built all this great stuff. You have your own applications that everyone gets to visit like 4 or 5 times a day. That's really everyone's dream. And the problem now is that what if this application itself is infected? By nature, the application developers don't really put much attention into securing their code unless they have some compliance they need to follow, or Apple or Google will come back to them and tell them, guys, we found some malwares or some issues that are major. You cannot put this in our store, right? So some of the problems, I'm not going to go on them one by one, but one of the scariest part is that in most cases, you don't have any security testing. In many cases, there is no encryption or very weak one. The side channel data leaks and the risk of the client-side injection. What if someone can use the client that you put to your users, so the application mainly, to jump into the back end of your application and do whatever they need to do, right? Now, if you were following so far, I hope you at least have now an idea about the whole theory or the concept and the components. Now let's see why you need to do this early as possible. Now, if you remember, we said that DevOps by design means that you'll develop and push new products or codes every day. Now, if we were thinking that we will follow the old processes where your application development team will need to get approval from the CISO every time they add a line of code, it's not really going to happen. It will be a bottleneck, and thus you cannot really wait until you have products going out to users and being utilized to start doing these kind of activities. At the same time, if you just release products without securing them, we all know that it's going to be a killer. So the discussion of what risks come with these components and with these technologies and with the whole concept should really happen as early as possible. As early as the time that the CEO comes in or the CMO jumps in and say, guys, we need to do something different. And they start embarking on that journey of digital transformation. This is the best case. That being said, if they already started, there's still, of course, things that you can do. Now, in this slide, I'm trying to align some of these risks or problems with services that you can offer to your clients to kind of cover or at least have some awareness of what to expect. What you will see here is kind of a mixture between services, consulting, and training in some cases. So it's not really everything. We had a list of more than 65 items. And what I would suggest, if you feel that any of them kind of relates to what you're doing, you can contact Jessica. Her email will be available on the last slide, and she'll be able to provide you access to the full list. And it's a lot better categorized. So you'll see that, for instance, under cloud, these are the services that could be offered, these are the consultancy services that could be offered, and these are the trainings that you can offer your customers to have this awareness built up. Let's take, for instance, the DevOps, right? You really want to make sure that you test the container. This is one of the first things. If you use a container that was generated by someone else or from a different project, you want to make sure that this one itself is not infected. So there is products and services that really work on this in specific. They go and analyze the endpoints, they do pen test to it. Most cases, that will be a black box even, just to try to make sure that we push it. You can have something like SOC as a service to look at it while it's operating. So you have logs on everything that is happening, right? If we're looking at the cloud, things like risk assessment, compliance assessment, reviewing the codes, if we're talking about web application as well, is very important. And some of the trainings you can see if the customer is in banking, for instance, or something like PCI DSS will be a necessity. ISO is going to be a necessity in most cases for all types of organizations. Now, again, if you look at big data, the source code review is very important. Database security assessment is really important. So these are kind of just a brief of what could be offered. If you have a discussion with anyone that is already on this journey or starting this journey, there is a lot you can offer them. And trust me, if you do these things, a lot of products as well will come into play. So it's just about when did you get involved on this discussion or how. That's a whole thing. So again, from our portfolio perspective, we'll look at, we have three pillars under our cybersecurity department. One is the services, one is the trainings, and one is the vendors. I'm sure that you were kind of expecting more details and depths of each component, but honestly, we had one webinar specific to IoT security risks. Probably we'll be planning something around big data. That is like one full session just dedicated to big data or to cloud, so that we can elaborate more in those subjects if needed. Again, don't forget, if you need to have the list of services, full list mapped to security risks that we discussed today, Jessica can be reached. You'll find her email on the last slide, and I will leave you to Jessica. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Walid. I hope everybody enjoyed that. I'm just going to take you through some of our updates, and then if anyone has any questions, we can go through those. So, obviously, if you would like to watch any of our previous webinars that we've done, you can find them on our YouTube channel, which is Ingram Micro Cybersecurity. Our latest webinar was about cyber resilience. And please keep an eye out for our upcoming newsletter for August, which is all about user and entity behavior analytics. It's a different approach you get to protect against cyber attacks. So please keep an eye out in your inbox for that one. And if you have any questions, you can always tweet us at @IMCybersecurity. We recently had some cybersecurity events as well. So yesterday, actually, we had a cybersecurity event in Cairo, which was hosted by our senior consultant, Dr. Ariana, and she presented all about our cybersecurity processes and how for cybersecurity it's important to have a three-tiered approach, which is people, processes, and technology, which is briefly what Walid just touched on as well. And we've also continued to do the ForcePoint onboarding events across the region. So we had one in Levant last month, and we have some upcoming events for ForcePoint in Pakistan. If you're in that region, please keep an eye out for it. We also continue to do the partner engagement, so we'll do enablement sessions for you, and we also offer free public discovery reports for your clients, so do get in touch if you would like us to conduct any of those. And finally, we do have the Partner Security Questionnaire, which we've specially developed so that you can use it for your customers to identify any areas for improvement to their security strategy. So you can contact me on at jessica.demaro@ingrammicro.com. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to share any of the content that you've seen today. And thank you for joining. Are there any questions before we finish? Please just type them in the message box or on the Q&A. Just let us know. We'll wait a couple more minutes. Okay, there don't seem to be any questions, so please just get in touch if you do have anything you would like to ask us offline, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. Oh, actually, there might be one question. 1 second. Hang on 1 minute. No questions.
No questions, just a comment. All right.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.